Hey everyone, Happy New Year. I'm with Ann Applebaum, the author of Autocracy in America, also the host of the new season of Autocracy in America, which is starting back up on Friday. That's season three. That's when the first episode is coming out. And she is also the author of a fantastic article in The Atlantic where she is a contributor. Trump's American dominance may leave us with nothing. And for several years, she has been warning about Trump's authoritarian agenda. She uses the A word. I'm so glad she does. I wish more people would. I wish more people would also use the F word, fascism. I wish more people would also use white nationalism. And folks, as of this recording, and listen, I'm going to hit you with a lot of news because the Energy Secretary of the United States of America now says that United States of America will control Venezuela's oil indefinitely. After little Marco Rubio on Saturday tried to clarify Donald Trump's remarks that, oh, no, no, we won't control Venezuela, Donald Trump comes out later and says, we're going to run it, we're going to control it. Yesterday, Donald Trump, in a very, I think, illegal post, openly talked about capturing Venezuela's oil and selling it at market price. And then he alone will control the money for the benefit of the United States and Venezuela. Now you have conflicting reports between Marco Rubio and Mike Johnson about Greenland, where Marco Rubio today has come out and said, yes, Donald Trump will come out and buy Greenland. Donald Trump says he needs Greenland. That will trigger Article 5 of NATO. And also, and this is top of my head, I want to make sure I get everything. Donald Trump has also threatened Mexico, Colombia, Cuba, and there's already China, which he has threatened as the 51st state. Now, MAGA is thumping its chest and saying, yes, American might, military, and superiority. But you wrote a piece and you have been warning about something called consequences and blowback. There's a lot to get into, but I set the table for you. Where do you want to begin, man?
We could begin with Venezuela and oil,
Let's
actually,
do it.
because first of all, there are a lot of weird claims circulating. Donald Trump says Venezuela stole American oil or something, or
Yeah.
or the U.S. is owed some oil from Venezuela. This is a kind of garbled myth in which he's mixed up bits of history. Venezuela did nationalize some American oil equipment some years ago, but in phases over a number of decades. But there is no stolen oil, so this is a made up story. Second of all, the oil seems to be not so much about Venezuela, but about Iraq. If you remember, Donald Trump was always upset that we hadn't taken the oil in Iraq.
Yeah.
Why did we go to Iraq to not take the oil? And so it seems to be somehow connected in his mind to some kind of failure in Iraq. Thirdly, I think it's an episode that is useful in really explaining and defining what Donald Trump means by control and what he thinks U.S. foreign policy is for. So it's not for building alliances, making America prosperous, creating trade relationships that are reliable. It's not for fixing global problems like climate change or solving wars. The purpose of foreign policy is to enrich people around Donald Trump. Maybe Trump himself, maybe his family, maybe his donors, maybe the American oil industry. Maybe some Americans could benefit from this, maybe if they work for Exxon, I don't know. But the purpose is to, in his mind, I'm not saying this will be successful, but the purpose in his head is that foreign policy should be about getting stuff and bringing it back. And, you can use the expression neocolonialism, or you could use some kind of metaphor to do with kings or the mafia. I mean, depending on which frame you want. But it is almost, it is the polar opposite of American foreign policy, at least as it's been run in theory, and it's been run for the most of the last 70 years since the Second World War. So we don't care anymore about alliances. We don't care anymore about democracy. We don't care anymore about the rule of law. We don't care anymore about global peace or, the relationships between countries. What we care about is extraction. We're going to extract oil from Venezuela indefinitely, and we're going to enrich people somewhere. I mean, it's a little vague right now who will be enriched, but you can assume it's people in the oil industry who are donors of Donald Trump.
And as he's already admitted on Air Force One that he didn't tip off Congress, didn't get a military authorization to illegally invade Venezuela and engage in a regime change, he did admit openly that he did tip off oil companies, and both before and after. And he has mentioned oil more than 24 times. And I think it's an important point that in the past, at the very least, uh, when America has engaged in these follies, they at least give a pretense. You see, you hear stuff like democracy. You hear things like we're going to help the people of Venezuela. Maduro was a terrible man. But now speaking about garbled myths, no mention of democracy whatsoever. When it comes to Maria Machado, who has the backing of the people, he's completely sidelined her, probably, according to some reports, pissed off that she won the Nobel Peace Prize, which forced him to give himself the FIFA World Peace Prize. And the garbled myths, they can't even keep their story straight because every time they attempt a rational narrative to explain this illegal action, Donald Trump just comes out and tells a supervillain plot. We want the oil. We're going to take the oil. I'm going to take the money. That's that. But what worries me also with, let's just stick with Venezuela, is already we're seeing, and on the ground in Caracas and others, there is suppression, and there is also some rebel groups that are fighting back. And I'm sitting here thinking, and I'm an English major, but being a student of U.S. history and simply having common sense, if a foreign country is now telling me that you are coming to my country, taking the most valuable resource, and then extracting it for your own benefit and putting in a puppet government, I might rebel. And
You might. You might. I mean, take a step back. I want to say a word about the Venezuelan opposition because I did go to Venezuela a few years ago, and I have met a number of the opposition leaders who are in exile. And I did interview Maria Corina Machado some months ago, twice actually. I've spoken to her, and I know some of the people who work for her. And I think it's important to understand that this is an opposition movement that worked unbelievably hard to reach all kinds of people. So it's not just for rich people. It's not just the elite. It tried very hard to reach people in the favelas and the poorer parts of the cities. During the election campaign in 2024, they fanned out all around the country and under enormous pressure. So they were beaten, they were harassed, they were arrested. Some people were killed in the course of the campaign, and afterwards. They nevertheless won the election, and they were also able to prove that they had won. So they had people in the polling stations around the country, and they showed that they had won about 60% of the votes. Maria Corina herself was not on the ballot because she was forbidden from running, but someone called Edmundo Gonzalez was on the ballot. And he is now the legitimate president of Venezuela. So it's not as if they are some upstart group or people we've never heard of or some random people who object to the regime. These are people with a real base, with a real organization, who've been working very hard for many years to fight, to fight what had been an increasingly autocratic and is a profoundly corrupt regime. I mean, there's no question about that. And they've also been talking to the Trump administration over many months, and they were in favor of some U.S. action in Venezuela, on the assumption that there would be, that they'd done what they could. They had the election. They'd put pressure on the regime, and they were unable to push Maduro out because he was surrounded by Cuban bodyguards and helped by the military. And I think the shock first of the Trump press conference in which he dismissed Machado he said she's a nice lady, but nobody respects her, which is very bizarre. She is very widely respected among many different kinds of people.
Doesn't she have the support of 80% of Venezuelans?
I mean, who knows what the real number is, but she certainly won the election. And she's somebody who has made a great effort to reach across all kinds of geographic and social boundaries and so on. So she's perceived as someone who cares about Venezuela. And she's also surrounded by advisors, by people economists. There's a whole generation of economists and people who worked in the Venezuelan oil industry who left the country, who would work with the democratic opposition to rebuild the country and so on. So it's not as if she's some fly-by-night person. She's very solidly grounded. And for Trump to kind of dismiss her like that, I think was very shocking to them. I talked to one Venezuelan on Saturday night, actually, after these events, and he told me that the day was like a roller coaster. There was this
Mm,
kind of ecstasy that Maduro was gone. For them, that was, and then this crash when they saw the press conference,
yep.
and then this realization by the end of the day that, oh, this is somebody who was in exile who said, oh, maybe we aren't going to be able to go home after all. And as you've just said, there's been this, what looks like what happened. I mean, it's wrong to use the expression regime change. I mean, this was dictator change.
Yep.
They took out one dictator and they've put in another one. And the Venezuelans are already using repression. They've passed some kind of law. I mean, I don't know how realistic this is. That says it's illegal to celebrate the exit of Maduro, and they will punish and arrest people who do. So there's now both the military and the police, and they have this paramilitary called colectivos, are beginning to patrol the street and make sure that nobody's too happy that Maduro is gone. And so what you now have on the one hand, the United States talking about extracting the only thing that Venezuela has. I mean, they have an agriculture industry too, but their most important source of wealth is oil.
Oil.
It's talking about stealing the oil and just leaving the repressive system in place. And as you point out, there will be objections to this. There will be objections from the regime. Eventually, there'll be objections from the opposition. There are all kinds of other groups in Venezuela that have various different interests. It's very hard to see how this goes smoothly over time. There will also be objections from other parts of Latin America and maybe from other parts of the world. One of the reasons that U.S. power and U.S. military power had the acceptance that it did over recent decades is that it was understood the U.S. is very powerful, but also that the U.S. does diplomacy, that there's someone to negotiate with, that the U.S. isn't a perfect or admirable superpower all the time, but some of the time it is. And we had allies who respected and admired us and worked with us. Once we don't have any allies, once we're just a regional bully who doesn't care about anything, values, democracy, rule of law, then we will find that a lot of people who are willing to do things for us in the past will be much less willing to do so. And we will also find that a lot of our relationships in the region, both in our own region and around the world, will become a lot more difficult. And you're right. I mean, there will be a backlash in Venezuela, but the backlash will also maybe not be immediate because these things take time, but there will be a long-term backlash, and it will not be good for the United States, neither for our prosperity or for our security.
Relationships require reciprocity, and the Donroe Doctrine, I did not make that up. I wish I did, because it's so stupid. I wanted to use that to mock Donald, but that's what he described as the Donroe Doctrine, which was then, if you will, articulated by Stephen Miller on his unhinged appearance on CNN with Jake Tapper, which is essentially, we have the strength, we're the American military, we're going to grab what we want. And pardon me for saying this, Ann, but because it all comes from the unhinged mind of Donald Trump, as Susan Wiles described him, as an alcoholic's personality, her words, not mine, in the Vanity Fair article that came out a couple of weeks ago, even though he's a teetotaler. It reminds me of how he treats women. I'm just going to grab him by the pee. And his behavior, right? I have the power. I'm a privileged man. I have celebrity. They let you get away with it when you're rich and famous and powerful. Now I'm the president. I'm going to grab Venezuela's oil. I'm going to go grab Greenland. What you going to do about it? You're not going to do anything. But like you mentioned, we live in a world and relationships have reciprocity. And what I worry about is there's a sugar high. There's always an initial sugar high with a regime change or a dictator swap, right? Saddam Hussein's statue falls. U.S. military, nothing's going to compete with our U.S. military. Of course, people on the streets who've been repressed by this dictator initially, they're like, this is awesome. Then they say, all right, we want our freedom. And America or its puppet regime says, oh, no, no, no. We're in charge now. And then it switches. Like you said, it takes some time, but I think the world, especially Americans, are so fatigued by our imperialistic project that even the poll numbers right now are not like usually usually they spike in the 80s. Rah, rah, rah. Right now, it's like 50-50. And what I worry about is Colombia. I don't know if you've heard the Colombian president. He has now openly defied Donald Trump. He has made common cause with Venezuela. He said, these are our brothers. Then he's gone after Mexico, again made a threat today and yesterday, just kind of the right wing is ceding the ground to invade Mexico, which has long been the plan of Stephen Miller, according to Olivia Troy and Miles Taylor. In the first Trump administration, they both heard his, pardon my language, wet dream to bomb Mexico and Latin America. And he's also threatening Cuba. there's different ways for people, if you will, to respond. There's different ways for people to fight. And I want to ask you about this. With the rebel groups already in place, yes, these countries cannot take out America when it comes to one-on-one, mano a mano, but there's asymmetrical warfare that we've seen even in the 21st century weakens America, extracts our resources, goes after our infrastructure, acts of terrorism, puts a target on the back of U.S. companies, U.S. tourists, drains us of our resources, and essentially is a death by a thousand cuts.
No, that's one of the possible outcomes. I mean, although I would also say there's some other weird things here. I mean, the U.S. has no presence in Venezuela. We don't have any troops there. We don't even have an embassy there. I mean, maybe there's a few Americans there, but not too many. And so, how I don't even understand the mechanism by which all these things are going to happen. How do we take control of Venezuela's oil if we're not there? I mean, oil isn't a thing like that lies on the ground that you can swoop in, Hawk helicopter and take away. You have to invest, you have to build infrastructure. You have to, and in the case of Venezuela, apparently you have to invest billions of dollars. It's good, infrastructure has deteriorated over many years. Um, and to make an investment like that, you need contracts, you need permanent relationships, you need some kind of rule of law. I mean, even the most rapacious American company isn't going to go into a situation where they're not sure whether their 10-year investment will last that long, because who knows what kind of government there'll be in a year and a half. And so even the they have, or even the imagination they have about imperialism is strangely lacking in substance. Like
Shocking, Anne. Shocking.
how will we do it? And there's another piece of this as well, which is, I also think it's a mistake. I mean, maybe Stephen Miller has a strategy. Maybe there are people around Trump who have strategies or who have a long-term vision of how this would play out. I don't think Trump himself thinks like that or ever has. He likes to be seen as the winner in any given situation. He likes dramatic actions. That's true. He likes to do something dramatic. But what happens afterwards? What's the follow-up? What's the long-term plan? He's really never been interested in that. I mean, I saw this extensively in his negotiations with, over Russia and Ukraine. He wanted a dramatic thing. Putin will come to Alaska, and then, we'll meet and there'll be a dramatic scene and everything will be fixed. And it didn't happen because they had no idea who Putin was and they didn't know how to talk to him and they didn't understand. Anyway, that's a subject maybe for another day. But the point is that they didn't have a. He's never bothered to understand that war, and he's never thought through the consequences of anything that he does. To win the war, you'd have to put pressure on Russia, not put pressure on Ukraine, because it's Russia who's running. But you can see it in almost every single one of his policies, that he likes drama, he likes action, but he doesn't see any big pictures at all.
You could see in the trade war, the disastrous trade war, where he believed that the rest of the world was screwing us because he didn't understand how tariffs and trade works. And voila, the rest of the world is now isolating us, and we've lost economic partners. And Canada's turning to China and Europe, and China says, okay, we won't buy soybeans from you. We'll just go to Argentina and Brazil. And now his own base is sitting there saying, oh my God, you bankrupted us. Folks, imagine that now with foreign policy. Voila, just complete cluster F. Speaking about cluster F, and you mentioned Russia, yesterday the Trump administration also publicly threatened the interim replacement dictator, Delcy Rodriguez, that you better not deal with China and Russia, and said, if you deal with China and Russia, there will be consequences. Venezuela used to be the biggest oil partner to China. And then earlier today, I don't know if you saw, Anne, about 2 hours ago, U.S. has seized Bella 1, a Russian oil tanker. Your response to that?
I would like to know a little more before I give a full response, because I don't fully understand exactly what happened or what the logic is. it looks to me like this is about trying to, show how they're going to enforce rules on Venezuela, even outside of Venezuela, even without going into the country. But the threat to Russia runs almost exactly. This is where you have the strategy issue. Runs exactly opposite to what Trump's policy towards Russia has been so far, which is to try to suck up to Russia, be nice to Russia. I mean, I can only assume that, again, these policies run on different tracks. There's Trump thinking about, the negotiations of Ukraine over here, and not understanding how capturing a tanker might affect that. He doesn't see these things as connected. Each thing is its separate glorious action. That would be my best guess as to what just happened.
Yeah, and like you, I just want some more information to come out before we can actually see what's happening. But it just shows you in war, when you engage in regime change or dictator swaps, you're in control until you're not. There's so many moving parts, folks, that there's always blowback and there's always unintended consequences, and there's always chaos. We have a history here going back to the 50s. When it comes to Central America and Latin America, never turns out well. But speaking about Russia and China, you know, um, I recall several months ago on Russian TV, and I think CNN was the only outlet that actually translated this. They were openly talking about plans where Russia was going to get Poland and Balkans and Ukraine, and the United States would get Canada and Greenland, and I think Panama. And there was, if you will, an imaginary carving up of the world into spheres, right? United States, Russia, and then South Asia, Southeast Asia, Africa would be China. Uh, Russia doesn't have that sphere of influence, but we know Putin has those ambitions. How does Donald Trump's actions in the past week, when it comes to this regime change in Venezuela, also the threats against Greenland, help, if you will, effectuate that attempt to upend the current world order and help Russia and help America and the oligarchs?
So there has been an idea kicking around in Russian propaganda and in the sort of MAGA world propaganda, sort of online world, that the world should be divided into three spheres of influence: US, Russia, and China. And US would get the Western Hemisphere, and Russia could do what it wanted in Europe, and China could do what it wanted in Asia. And this was, this is their idea as an alternative to a world run by the rule of law, alliances, values-based foreign policy, where we have relationships with allies based on, common democracy and so on. I mean, there are many problems with this vision. The first one you've already pointed out, which is that Russia doesn't control Europe and China doesn't control Asia. Nobody really much wants to be a Chinese colony in Asia either. And nor do we control the Western Hemisphere in the way that Trump imagines that we would control it. But the effort to create it, the effort to build this Western Hemisphere sphere of influence vision is going to be unbelievably damaging. As I said, it will damage our relationship to Europe, maybe fatally. If there is some kind of effort to take Greenland, I mean, militarily, it's hard to imagine how that would work, but or economically or otherwise, against European resistance, that will fatally damage our relationship to Europe. And those are economic relationships, cultural relationships, travel and tourism. I mean, we have thousands and thousands of deals are done every day between Europe and the United States, and that would slowly come to an end. It will do damage to our relationships in Latin America sooner or later. And we have, or indeed the rest of the Western Hemisphere, which includes Canada. And Canada is already, I've been several times to Canada over the last year, and it's really hard to describe what, reawakened Canadian anger and nationalism look like. I mean, it's not a country that's
I saw it
famous.
also, and I was there a couple of months ago. I was like, wow, where'd this come from? I thought you all were nice.
No, they're really, really angry. And they're angry, and they, we haven't gotten to the phase of retaliation and so on yet, but we could. There are deep, again, energy links between the U.S. and Canada. There are trade links. There are cultural, again, many, many links. And cutting those off will damage Americans. I mean, there's no question about it. It will do damage to American prosperity. I could tell the same story about Mexico. I mean, Mexico, I could tell the same story about almost all these countries. So the process of trying to create this sphere of influence will be damaging to us, but also, of course, it gives carte blanche to the Russians and the Chinese. So if the Chinese wanted to invade Taiwan next week, or maybe, for example, fly into Taiwan and try and kidnap their president, they would say, well, these are the rules that the United States has just said are the new rules. So it's legitimate for us to do that. If Russia wants to invade a NATO state, I don't know, Baltic states or indeed Germany. Putin himself was a KGB officer in Germany in the 1980s. He remembers when Germany was part of the Soviet Empire, Eastern Germany, and he might feel that he wants it back again. He said that any place where there were ever Russian soldiers can be Russian again.
Wow.
If he decides to do that, then he has a tailor-made excuse. Americans are doing it in their hemisphere. We're doing this in our hemisphere. And so all those things become the taboo against them, the fear of doing it, the idea that there's a system of rules and there's a UN charter and we don't, we try not to break it. As that begins to fall away, you won't see more peace in the world. You'll see more warfare, and you'll see more large countries trying to exert their are trying to influence or invade or occupy or indeed extract resources from smaller ones. And that's the thing that worries me the most, is that we change all of our relationships with the world, and then we also give license to the world's dictators or would-be dictators to do ugly things. And I can't say this enough. I mean, I know some of this seems very far away and theoretical, and these are things happening in other parts of the world, but it will affect American prosperity. It will affect the way we live. It will affect the way we think about ourselves. We will become a different kind of country. I mean, we've always aspired to be, not always successfully achieved it, but we've aspired to be a country that did some good in the world. And once we don't do that anymore, I think Americans will feel differently about America.
And the world will feel differently about America and our standing in the world, which has already gone down, folks. I know this is a really strange a data point I'm about to give you, but when Biden was in charge, the American brand, folks, was about like plus 14. And a couple of months ago, just 9 to 10 months in the Trump presidency, we had already gone down to -3. We live in a world, and we have relationships, and we have alliances, and we do business, and we have trade partners. And already, like Anne, I've traveled abroad. People are looking at us with a different lens, sometimes with pity and sadness, but also with rage. And furthermore, as America is embarking on these deranged imperialistic adventures to placate the whim of a madman, Donald Trump, who's also a complete ignoramus when it comes to economic and foreign policy, we further isolate ourselves. I mean, this ultimately, and I think this is an important point that you mentioned, Anne, this does not make America great again. This isolates us from our allies. It just harms our economy. We've already seen what's happened with the trade war. Prices are up. People can't afford groceries. People can't afford healthcare. Tourism to America has dropped. I think we've lost almost $50 billion. Our best scientists, our doctors are being poached by Europe and China, folks, as we speak. We have brilliant minds that used to come here, right? Scholars, immigrants used to come to this country to make it great again. They're literally, Stephen Miller saying, don't come unless you're a white refugee from South Africa. And now we're engaging in dictatorship regime changes. Speaking about Greenland, and seeing what just happened with Venezuela, following Donald Trump for 10 years, taking him literally and seriously, the fact that they have doubled down for the past 4 days about Greenland, again today, I fear that in some way, shape, or form, they will try to take it. What will happen if Donald Trump and MAGA takes or attempts to take Greenland, which, by the way, belongs to Denmark, which is a NATO ally?
So let me first say, I was in Denmark almost exactly a year ago, right after this subject first came up. And I talked to lots of people there, and I've been talking to Danes ever since. It's important to understand that over the last many decades, U.S. and Denmark have had completely compatible ideas about Greenland. There is actually a U.S. military base on Greenland right now. There is one now. there used to be more U.S. soldiers on Greenland, but they've been taken away over the years. So if Greenland were so important that we needed to defend it, we could have sent troops there already. We could have done it during Donald Trump's first term or Biden's term, or we could have done it this year. There's nobody stopping the U.S. from expanding its base in Greenland. That was always part of the Danish-American relationship. Second of all, the minerals in Greenland, the so-called, there are companies there, including some American companies, although I think not very many, looking for whatever rare earths or other kinds of minerals. It's very hard to dig for things in Greenland because it's very cold. There's a lot of ice, and it's not a fantastic place to work. And most of these companies haven't been very successful. So the idea that there's some bonanza in Greenland and we can take it, it's as crazy as the idea that we can take the oil from Venezuela, as if it were some easy thing to do. And also, as I say, you want to go dig in Greenland, please get a license from the Danish government. You can go right now. And so all the reasons that they're giving for wanting Greenland make no sense. And this is what is puzzling the Danes and puzzled them from the beginning, that it was kind of Kafkaesque. Trump kept saying, I want it, but he couldn't ever articulate why. Why does he want it? The only explanation I have is that it looks big on the Mercator projection, on a map. And again, as we've already discussed, he likes these dramatic things. He likes drama and he likes creating attention. But what is Greenland? Greenland does have a slightly separate status within Denmark, but nevertheless, its inhabitants are Danish citizens. They vote in Danish elections. They're members of the Danish parliament from Greenland. They have a hundreds of years relationship. The Danes spend a lot of money in Greenland paying for they have full health care in Denmark, which we don't have in the United States. The Danes pay for that. They pay for the school system. They pay for the transportation. And, this is all in a place that's, despite the name, very cold and icy. And so, what Trump is talking about doing is taking something for no reason, in a way, and I don't fully understand what their plan is, but in a way that would offend one of America's closest allies. Yep. And provoke a huge split with the rest of Europe. There was a statement today and yesterday from, I believe it was the French, German, Polish, Italian, and a handful of other prime ministers and heads of state saying they stand by the Denmark and yep, they. That was yesterday. It was yesterday. And so, you have the specter of the U.S. breaking with its closest allies over a lump of ice that we don't need, and that the only reason Trump wants it is because it looks big on the Mercator projection. That leads us into very weird territory. And that people in the State Department would be forced to go along with this, and maybe the American military, God forbid, is almost hard to imagine. We're now at a level of very surreal behavior. Once again. There is we don't need Greenland to be U.S. property for any reason.
And speaking about even the oil, it's an important point, folks. They've done the math on this. Even to extract and refine the oil of Venezuela takes more than 10 years and a massive economic commitment, massive infrastructure. So it's not like we're just going to, Donald Trump thinks we're going to go to Venezuela with a straw, suck up the oil like Daniel Day-Lewis from There Will Be Blood, and then sell it on the market. It's not like that. You have to go there, put the boots on the ground, the infrastructure, someone has to run it because apparently we're the ones running Venezuela now and we're controlling the oil. So even getting the oil from Venezuela is going to take more than a decade. And like Anne said with Greenland, right? Who would want to go there? I don't know if Marco Rubio wants to go there and freeze in Greenland as the viceroy of Greenland. But for those who don't know how NATO works, Anne, and I think this is important, can you explain what would happen if Donald Trump, by any absurd means, does try to invade, capture, take over Greenland, how that will trigger Article 5 and upend NATO?
Well, NATO was not built to deal with wars between NATO members, but Article 5 is the most important piece of the NATO treaty. It's a very simple, it's just a sentence or two. And it says that in the case of an attack on a member of NATO, all the others will respond. And so if the United States attacks Denmark, then presumably the rest of NATO responds. I mean, it's such an unprecedented and bizarre situation that I don't know that anyone's planned out how exactly that treaty would work in the case of an American attack on Denmark. But there is an implication in the NATO treaty that we will defend our members, and so maybe some would do it. It's hard to imagine. I would also say worth remembering the only time Article 5 has ever been invoked was after 9/11. And it was invoked by the Europeans who came to the aid of the United States. And European soldiers, including Danish soldiers, fought in Afghanistan. Several dozen Danes died in Afghanistan, and were, and I think as a percentage of the country of Denmark, it's a very high percentage. And the Europeans supported us all through those wars, even though many of them disagreed with the premise of them and were wary about doing this. But as signatories of the NATO treaty, they felt that they were it was important to show that they were loyal allies of the United States. Trump seems to not. He issued some kind of crazy Truth Social post today, where once again he talked about NATO being a drain on the United States. He never ever mentions the fact that Danes died for America, and no Americans have yet died for Denmark. But what it would do to the NATO treaty would be to somehow tear it apart. And I should say, this is all happening while also in Paris right today there have been more Ukraine-Russia negotiations, which are supposed to be creating some kind of security guarantee for Ukraine after the war ends. But, can America be part of a security guarantee when no one believes America anymore? And if America is attacking NATO allies, how do we envision America cooperating with NATO in Ukraine? I mean, all kinds of things start to fall apart.
And this has already happened early in the year when America sidelined Ukraine with its meeting with Russia and Saudi Arabia, and our European allies openly said, "Oh, we can no longer trust America." And Donald Trump promoted Russian talking points, blaming Ukraine for being invaded by Russia, because this is how his brain works, folks. And Miles Taylor, who was on a couple of days ago, he was a national security expert in the first Trump administration, says he was in the room hearing this. And as Anne says, it's not that far-fetched. Donald Trump gets ideas in his head, then makes a pronouncement, says he wants certain thing, and the reeks around him then try to engineer, if you will, a rationale to make it happen. And then other remoras who realize that Donald Trump is this reckless, then latch on and try to benefit from his policies, such as the Broligarchy, other authoritarians, the oligarchs. And when it comes to Greenland, many people in the comment section rightfully mentioned that Peter Thiel and the tech bros want Greenland because they want to create their free city praxis in Greenland, which is their techno-fascist utopian experiment. If you don't know that, I had a conversation with Jacob Silverman and Gil Duran about that 2 days ago. Not making this up. It's all this batshit dystopian stuff that seems like bad high school fiction, but voila. And I do want to let you go in a couple minutes because you're in Poland. I did want to ask you this. With Poland as a neighbor close to Russia, how are the Poles feeling about this moment right now?
Nervous. So in Poland, we not only is the war happening not so far away, we have lots of Ukrainian refugees are in Poland. Poland has been one of the most important sources of weaponry and support for Ukraine. But Poland has also we've had a number of big incidents of Russian sabotage here. We had Russian drones in Poland. Yep. More recently, there was an attempt to blow up a Polish train, which had it been successful would have created a lot of casualties. And there is an awareness now of this, pressure from Russia seeking to undermine. There's a lot of Russian propaganda here. There's attempts to create pro-Russian political parties here as well. And to have at this moment a kind of unpredictable, unreliable United States adds a kind of extra layer of anxiety. It's also for Poles in particular, it's very disorienting because Poland is a very pro-American country. Historically, lots of Poles went to America. There was always an image of America as a, great democracy that was our friend, and we wanted to be like America, and so and to have it change this rapidly from their point of view, it's kind of shifts the world, and it makes people feel uncomfortable and lost. I mean, I don't know how else to describe it. It's like losing, a dependable friend,
Yeah.
and discovering that it's something else. And then of course, there are people in Poland who say, right, well, this is what America's like now. We better be like that too. And you have a kind of MAGA light thing happening in Poland as well. Um, but but it just simply exacerbates divisions here and makes politics uglier here as well. So it's not a good moment. I mean, ironically, it's coming at a time when the Polish economy is doing really well. A lot of Polish emigres are coming back from Europe and returning to Poland. So a lot of things are going well here. But in this context of geopolitical uncertainty, I think lots of people are nervous.
And you mentioned Poles don't understand why this is happening because they've been a long-time ally of America. That's how Canada feels. That's like so many people feel. We're your friends. Why are you doing this to us? And that's Donald Trump. He's a creature of appetite, of avarice. He throws his allies and friends under the bus on a whim. And who cares about loyalty? But again, folks, again, there will be consequences because we live in the world. Two final quick questions I wanted to ask you, probably connected. Conservative movement. Republicans control the House, they control the Senate, they have the Supreme Court. There are individuals within that party, despite their performances, who know better and who aren't stupid, who aren't this reckless, and yet there they are cheerleading Donald Trump, essentially isolating America and making us weak again. Is there any way to reach that movement? I mean, your friends in the Republican Party on the deal, do you talk to them? I know they're not this dumb.
So I'm not deeply connected to the Republican Party, sadly, at the moment. I mean, I am aware because I hear stories that, as you say, there are members of Congress and there are members of the Senate who are disturbed by what's happening. The only thing I feel that would create a sense of change would be a big Democratic victory in the midterms, or something that would give those Republicans the feeling that there's a path to change or that something can look different. The feeling up until now has just been that there's almost no point. I did hear one Republican say this. There's almost no point in objecting to Donald Trump because all that happens is that you then get drummed out of the party. And so once there's people who are able to show that you can object to him and you can survive and you can continue, then we might begin to get some more dissent. I mean, there is a little bit of dissent now. I
Yeah, you
saw
have
these.
Marjorie Taylor Greene, Thomas Massey coming out, and they represent the America First part of the MAGA movement. And the America First part of the MAGA movement, folks, don't sleep on it. A lot of people who voted for Donald Trump, America First for them, in addition to some very dangerous white nationalism, also is non-interventionism. Don't be the world's policeman and invest money in America instead of foreign wars abroad. And you see that now being articulated by all people. Thomas Massey and Marjorie Taylor Greene, and even Megyn Kelly 2 days ago. So that alone is a fracture within MAGA. The final question I have for you, and for many people listening right now, this is terrifying. And they see the institutions failing. They see Congress essentially sleepwalking. They see Chuck Schumer coming out, stern warnings. you know, I asked them to do something, and I was very disappointed. That's the exact word from him yesterday. I'm very disappointed. What can the people do? Because we still have the majority. But when it comes to the levers of power and creating foreign policy, a lot of people feel helpless. And we see this, pardon my language, cluster F, just this train heading off the cliff. Recommendations for the majority on how we can not just save our democracy, but also save our alliances and keep America from jumping off the cliff thanks to the whims of a madman.
So the answer to this question, there isn't a single answer. The answer a lot depends on who you are and what you do.
Hmm.
If you are a lawyer, you can do pro bono work for all the many people who are suing the Trump administration. There are lots of organizations that are doing that. You can find them pretty easy. If you're a doctor, you can be part of messaging to people that vaccines are good for you and keep your children safe. You can fight back against the propaganda that's coming from RFK Jr. and from the kind of the conspiracy theorists who now run the healthcare system. If you're in academia, you can try and save the programs that you know are worthwhile. You can begin to make the arguments, locally in your sphere among the people that you know. Um, think about who are your contacts, whatever you do, actually. I mean, if you work in a shop or I don't know, you teach French, I mean, whatever is your job. Um, look at who you are, what you do, um, who can you convince? Is there a local candidate who you can work for? A lot of people in America, I think, over many years, our local politics have atrophied. We don't pay attention to who's our state senator, our state legislator, and figuring out who those people are and are they good people and are they people who you want to work for and vote. I mean, finding a way to be engaged at the local level is something that I think everybody can do. I mean, the worst thing you can do in a way is doom scroll, you know, just watch endless programs and worry and, get worried and get upset and feel helpless. I mean, by doing something, by being engaged, you will, first of all, once you will begin to see paths to more. You will create an organization or you will work for a campaign, or you'll be part of a messaging system or something. Um, and also by doing something, you'll feel less helpless and less distressed. So being active i- is actually the cure for that feeling of hopelessness and depression.
Democracy is a contact sport, folks, and everyone has to fight for it, and everyone has a role to play, as we often say on the left hook. You have to be 10 toes down, and it doesn't matter. A lot of people tell me, and literally they start off with the question, I'm a nobody, Waj. What should I do? And I'm like, you know what? We're all nobodies, but we're all somebodies
Nobody.
to someone. And I'm just a middle-aged dad driving a minivan, but we all have a role to play. If you're a stay-at-home mom or stay-at-home dad, the way you conduct yourselves, the way you raise your children, your community, the way you
Yeah.
create alliances, if you look out for immigrants, if you're in your church, do you give refuge to people? If you're in your church, do you pick up the phone and call the local synagogue and the local mosque and create interfaith alliances? Do you run for school board? Do you run for local office, right? If you're in law firms, do you actually do pro bono work? If you have money, do you support the right candidates, the right NGOs, the right nonprofit groups, right? Everyone has a role to play, and at the very least, to be informed, even because we're fighting also the war of disinformation and lies and conspiracy theories. And with that, there's 3,600 people watching. This is a big deal, Anne. They came for you. Anne is joining us all the way from Poland. I kept her a little bit longer because she was on a roll. Anne Applebaum is a historian and a journalist and a writer. She writes essays for The Atlantic. Her latest article, which prompted me to actually reach out to her on a whim on Blue Sky, and she was kind enough to say, yes, is Trump's American dominance may leave us with nothing. Her book, Autocracy in America, is fantastic. I strongly recommend people read it. It's a quick, readable book, brevity. Thank you for the brevity, but warns about autocracy in America. And there's a new season of her podcast, Autocracy in America, Season 3, which is starting up on Friday. The first episode is coming out for The Atlantic. And shamelessly promote yourself, please.
Thank you very much. I'd be delighted if you listened to the podcast. It's the third season of a that I started before the election, and anyway, you'll find it reaches to some of the questions we've been discussing today.
And people said, please have Anne back on again. She's kind of a big deal. I'll ask her. I'm sure there's a lot going to be developing, so I'll ask her again in 2 weeks. And if I may, I'm trying to get better at this. And I've seen that children of immigrants, people of color, and women are really bad about what I'm about to do, but I'm trying. Please like and subscribe to The Left Hook. We apologize for apologizing. We're like, if you like The Left Hook, thank you, maybe, but I'm trying to get better. Everything is free here. There's no paywalls. I know things are rough for people, but I want people to be informed. So if you can, please subscribe. And if you have a few dollars, I have a special on. Everything's free, Ann, but it's 25% off. So instead of $5, it's forever $3.75 a month. Which is a good deal, right? Like, what else can I do? So I'm a terrible capitalist, but if you are watching for the first time, subscribe to Ann's Substack. Go buy her book, listen to her podcast. Season 3 starts on Friday. And if you have a few dollars left over, become a paid subscriber to The Left Hook. And if you have no money, I get it. Just subscribe for free. For the people who joined us late, 3,700 people, this will be up later today. I'm talking to Anne Applebaum, and we're talking about the inevitable consequences and blowback to Trump's just reckless, inane, and dangerous foreign policy, folks. We live in a world, and despite our American military and might, as we've seen before in Vietnam, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, it doesn't matter how many bombs you have or tanks you have. Hubris is the downfall of many great nations and leaders, but hopefully there's still time for us to correct course. And come back anytime. Thank you so much. And I appreciate you staying late. I know it's late there at 7 p.m. in Poland, so I hope you can have dinner.
Thank you. I will.
Take care, everyone. Be
Bye.
kind,
Thanks.
and please, oh, please don't be a fascist.
Thanks.